When Junior Soprano shoots Tony, it feels like something that was bound to happen. The moment doesn't come out of nowhere. It's the kind of violence that simmers for years, hidden under small talk, family dinners, and forced gestures of respect. When the gun goes off, it doesn't just tear through Tony's stomach. It tears through the illusion of what their relationship ever was. The official story is simple. Junior, lost in his dementia, mistakes Tony for little pussy Malanga, an old enemy from decades earlier. He's confused, frightened, and delusional. He's not himself. That's the explanation everyone clings to because the alternative, that some part of Junior meant it, is too heavy to live with. But The Sopranos was never about clean explanations. It's about what happens when reason breaks down, when human emotion, jealousy, pride, fear, take the wheel. And when you really trace Junior's path, when you look at what his life became and how his pride withered under Tony's shadow, you start to see the truth. Maybe Junior didn't consciously mean to shoot Tony, but somewhere, deep in the fog of his failing mind, something old and bitter remembered exactly what it was doing. For most of The Sopranos, Junior is a man drowning in history. He's one of the last links to the old world, a time when the mafia still carried mystique, when men like Johnny Boy Soprano commanded fear and respect just by walking into a room. Junior lived for that world. He built his entire identity on being part of something sacred, something powerful. But by the time the show begins, that world is gone. The mafia has been reduced to small scams and shrinking margins. The code of honor has eroded into paranoia and compromise. And Junior? He's an old man watching everything he believed in lose meaning. That's the tragedy of him. He's not just angry, he's obsolete. And Tony, his nephew, is the living reminder of that obsolescence. Tony doesn't play by the old rules. He doesn't revere the old men the way Junior did. He's practical, modern, almost corporate in how he runs things. He respects tradition just enough to use it as cover, but not enough to be bound by it. To Junior, that's blasphemy. It's like watching someone walk into church and use the altar as a table for counting cash. He can't stomach it, but he also can't stop it. Tony's power rises, his influence grows, and Junior, despite all his talk, knows he's never truly been feared the way Tony is. When Tony sets up the arrangement that makes Junior the boss in name but not in power, the wound cuts deep. It's one of the most humiliating things that ever happens to him. Everyone around him knows it's a front. The feds, the captains, the street guys, all of them. Junior has the title, but Tony controls the money, the sit-downs, the decisions. It's the ultimate insult for a man like him, because it takes away the one thing he still had, dignity. From that point on, their relationship changes. Junior stops seeing Tony as his nephew. He starts seeing him as a rival. Every family dinner, every shared joke, every polite exchange is layered with venom. And Tony, for his part, isn't innocent either. He enjoys it. He enjoys the feeling of superiority. There's something almost performative about how he talks to Junior, like he's reminding him who's really in charge, but disguising it as affection. That mix of power and pity is what destroys Junior the most, because for men like him, pity is worse than death. The thing about Junior is that his ego isn't just about power. It's about memory. He wants to be remembered as someone who mattered, someone who carried the old ways. He talks about the past because the present gives him nothing. He clings to nostalgia the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. So when Tony rewrites the rules, when he becomes the kind of boss who goes to therapy, who talks about panic attacks, who compromises with New York instead of fighting them, it's like Junior's legacy is being erased in real time. You can see it in the way he reacts to Tony's success. Every promotion, every decision, every whisper of Tony's influence makes Junior a little more bitter. He starts to see Tony as arrogant, ungrateful, and disrespectful. But under all that, what he really feels is fear. Fear that he's being forgotten. Fear that when he dies, no one will even mention his name. So when dementia starts to take hold, it doesn't erase that fear, it magnifies it. It turns it into a distorted obsession. His mind starts to eat itself, looping old memories with new resentments. Names blur, events merge. But the emotion, that sting of humiliation, stays sharp. It's like the one thing his brain refuses to lose. That's the key to understanding what happened the night he shot Tony. Dementia might explain the confusion, but it doesn't explain the emotion behind it, the focus, the hostility, the sudden clarity he seems to find in that moment. When Junior walks down that hallway, muttering to himself, it's not the movement of a man in panic, it's ritual. His voice is calm, almost cold. He calls out, aiming into the dark. He doesn't hesitate. He pulls the trigger as if the decision had already been made years ago. Even the name he says, Little Pussy Malanga, carries a strange, poetic truth. It's a ghost from his past, a man he once wanted dead. The fact that his brain chose that name, and not a random one, says something. It's as if his mind was confessing, in code. Tony had become his malanga, the man standing between him and respect. The names may have changed, but the feeling hadn't. People like to think dementia makes someone harmless, like they're just lost in their own fog. But it's not that simple. Dementia strips away filters, it removes inhibition, it lets buried feelings crawl back to the surface. What's left isn't random, it's raw truth. And the truth inside Junior Soprano was decades of resentment, pride, and a deep, unspoken wish that Tony would one day pay for what he'd done to him. So yes, Junior was confused. Yes, he was sick. But he was also acting out an emotion that had been festering for years. The disease didn't cause the act, it revealed the instinct behind it. Tony's reaction afterward tells you everything. When he wakes up, dazed and hooked to machines, he doesn't seem angry, he seems bewildered, like he's trying to make sense of something that shouldn't make sense. This is the man who's faced every threat imaginable. He survived mob wars, betrayals, indictments, but this hits different, because it's not business, it's family. It's the man who changed his diapers, the man who was supposed to protect him when his father was gone. Tony spends most of his life believing that blood means something. He breaks rules for family, he kills for family, he builds his identity around it. So when Junior shoots him, it's not just an attack on his body, it's an attack on that belief system. If even your own uncle can turn on you, then what's left of loyalty? What's left of meaning? That's why Tony never really forgives him. Even when everyone tells him Junior didn't know what he was doing, Tony doesn't buy it. He visits him, yes, but not out of compassion, out of obligation, out of confusion. There's a bitterness under every word, a refusal to let go of the idea that somewhere in that fading mind, Junior did know. Because Tony needs it to mean something. The alternative, that it was just random, meaningless, is even worse. In Tony's world, everything has to have intention, even violence, especially violence. It's the only way he makes sense of the chaos. So when the one act that nearly kills him seems to have no reason behind it, it breaks him. But here's the irony. Tony isn't wrong to think there was meaning. There was. Just not the kind he can understand. Junior's act wasn't planned. It wasn't a hit. It was the subconscious fulfilling a prophecy. It was the physical manifestation of everything that had gone unsaid between them. The bullet was years of humiliation compressed into one moment. Every time Tony undermined him. Every time he mocked his age. Every time he turned the old ways into a joke. The gunshot was Junior's way of taking something back. Power, control, dignity, even if just for a second. Because that's all it was, 1 second of clarity. 1 second where the old man wasn't confused, wasn't irrelevant, he was decisive, dangerous, respected, even if only by his own delusions. The saddest part is that he loses it immediately after. Once Tony is lying on the floor bleeding, the old confidence drains away. Junior retreats into confusion again. He hides, he panics, he forgets why he even did it. It's like his brain only let him have that one moment of purpose before swallowing him back into the fog. That's the tragedy of Junior's character, that even his final act of significance comes from madness. There's something almost Shakespearean about how the show treats their relationship. 2 generations locked in a silent power struggle, both believing they're right, both unable to let go of pride. Junior sees Tony as the ungrateful heir who corrupted the old ways. Tony sees Junior as the bitter relic who can't evolve. And neither of them can admit they love each other because love in their world looks like weakness, so they hide it behind insults, threats, and forced laughter. They never talk about the resentment, the rivalry, or the guilt. They let it rot until it explodes. The shooting isn't random, it's inevitable. It's what happens when 2 men spend years pretending their hatred doesn't exist. When you really think about it, that bullet isn't just the end of their relationship. It's the end of the old mafia itself. Junior represents the past, Tony represents the present. The moment the past shoots the present, it's like the old world finally collapsing in on itself. After that, nothing in the series feels the same. Tony's authority, his confidence, even his sense of immortality, all of it fades. The shooting changes him. It's the first real sign of decay. He becomes more paranoid, more cruel, more detached. It's as if something inside him died that night, not his body, but his belief in control. And maybe that's the most haunting consequence of all, that the act meant to restore one man's dignity ended up shattering the other's illusion of power. Years later, when Tony visits Junior in the nursing home, the weight of all this history comes crashing down. The scene is quiet, almost empty. Junior sits alone, frail and lost, his memory erased. Tony tries to reach him, to pull some meaning out of the past, but there's nothing. Junior doesn't even remember who he was. He doesn't remember being boss. He doesn't remember the family. He doesn't remember Tony. For a moment, Tony looks like he's going to explode, like he wants to scream, to force some recognition out of him. But then he just stares. Because he realizes that this nothingness is worse than revenge. It's erasure. Junior didn't just fade away, he took their entire history with him. And that's when Tony truly breaks. Because all his life, he believed the past could be controlled. That legacy was something you could build and protect. But now, staring at this empty old man, he sees the truth. That time erases everything. That one day, even the people who built empires are just names no one remembers. In that moment, it's almost as if Tony understands what drove Junior to pull that trigger. The fear of fading away. The panic of being forgotten. The desperate need to feel alive one last time, even if it meant destroying the thing you loved most. That's why the scene feels like closure, even though nothing is said. Because Tony finally sees that what happened between them wasn't about malice. It was about mortality. So did Junior Soprano shoot Tony intentionally? The answer depends on how you define intent. If you mean conscious, calculated thought, no. He didn't plan it, he didn't plot, his mind was too far gone for that. But if you mean something deeper, something emotional, spiritual, instinctive, then yes, absolutely. Because the body might forget, but the soul doesn't. Junior's body might have been confused, his mind might have been fractured. But his soul remembered exactly what it wanted. It wanted to matter, it wanted to be feared again, it wanted to be someone. And in that one moment, standing in that dark hallway, gun trembling in his hand, he got it. For the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. That's why, even in the chaos that follows, there's a strange calmness to his face, as if a part of him, however small, finally felt peace. Not pride. Not victory. Just relief. Because deep down, Junior wasn't shooting Tony. He was shooting the ghost of his own failure. He was pulling the trigger on everything he'd lost. The respect, the relevance, the power. Tony just happened to be the body that carried all those ghosts. And that's the cruel poetry of it. The act that gave Junior his final moment of clarity is the same act that doomed him to total oblivion. From then on, he's gone. His mind broken, his story over. The man who once commanded fear now can't even command a memory. Tony, meanwhile, carries the wound like an invisible scar. It becomes part of him. The paranoia, the bitterness, the fatalism, it all starts here. Junior's bullet didn't kill him, but it killed the version of Tony that believed he was untouchable. In the end, the question of intention almost doesn't matter. What matters is what the act revealed. The shooting stripped away all pretense, exposing what The Sopranos was always really about: pride, fear, and the slow decay of men who refuse to accept that their time is over. Junior's illness gave him an excuse, but the truth is, even without dementia, that bullet was always waiting to be fired. Maybe it wouldn't have been literal, maybe it would have come in some other form, but it was inevitable. Because you can't spend a lifetime resenting someone without that resentment finding a way out. So no, Junior didn't choose to shoot Tony, but his whole life chose it for him. Every insult, every humiliation, every reminder of his irrelevance loaded that gun long before he ever picked it up. The disease just pulled the trigger. And that's the brilliance of The Sopranos. It takes a simple act of confusion and turns it into a mirror for everything the show stands for. The death of legacy, the corrosion of family, the tragedy of men who mistake fear for respect. When you really think about it, there was never a version of this story where Junior dies peacefully. He was always going to destroy something on his way out. That's who he was, a man built for a world that no longer existed, trying to remind everyone, even in madness, that he once mattered. So when the gun goes off, it isn't random. It's the sound of a man's past refusing to die quietly. Tony survived the bullet, but the world they built together didn't. But what happens after a man survives a bullet he believes was meant for him? The body heals, the wound closes, but something invisible lingers. When Junior shot Tony, he didn't just wound him physically, he cracked the foundation of Tony's world. For the rest of the series, Tony walks around as a man who looks alive but moves like a ghost, haunted by the idea that if even his own blood could turn on him, then no one is safe. Not him, not his crew, not his family. The bullet didn't kill Tony, it infected him with doubt. The first stage of the fallout is disorientation. In those first episodes after the shooting, Tony is lost, not just because of the coma, but because of the realization that the universe doesn't follow the rules he built his life around. All his talk of loyalty, family, respect, it evaporates the moment he's staring down the fact that his uncle, his second father, pulled the trigger. For someone like Tony, who's built his identity around control, that's an existential collapse. That's why the coma sequence feels so profound. In those dreamlike scenes where he's Kevin Finnerty, Tony's stripped of everything that defines him, his name, his past, his power. He's polite, confused, almost gentle. It's as if the world is testing him with the question, who are you when all your armor is gone? The answer is terrifyingly simple. He's no one, he's just another man. That's the real punishment of surviving. Death would have been clean. Survival means living with that realization. When he wakes up, He tries to slip back into the same patterns, the same routines of power, the same rhythm of control. But something's missing. You can see it in the way he talks to Carmela, the way he looks at Meadow and AJ. There's a distance now, a sort of quiet that hangs in the air. He's been to the edge, and what he saw there stripped him of the illusion that he can hold it all together forever. The effect on his family is just as important. Carmela's fear after the shooting isn't just about Tony dying, it's about what his death would mean for her identity. She spent her life defending the illusion that Tony is invincible, that his sins can't touch them as long as he keeps the danger outside their home. But now the violence literally comes from inside the family. It's not some rival or enemy, it's his own uncle. That shatters the barrier between domestic and criminal life. When she looks at Tony in that hospital bed, there's pity in her eyes. And pity, for Tony, is worse than hate. He senses it. He hates the way people look at him like he's fragile. The world has seen him bleed. The boss who survived everything, jail, indictments, wars, almost died at the hands of an old man in slippers. For someone whose authority rests on image, that humiliation runs deep. Carmela's reaction also triggers something darker. She grows closer to religion, starts reflecting on mortality, begins to realize how fragile the life she's built really is. For Tony, that's suffocating. He needs Carmela to believe in him blindly. He needs her to treat him like he's inevitable. But after the shooting, she doesn't see a king anymore. She sees a man on borrowed time. Even AJ changes. His father's survival briefly gives him purpose, the idea that he can step up, protect the family, be the man his father was. But that illusion doesn't last. The fear of losing Tony plants something else in him, fatalism. The sense that no matter what he does, life will take it away. It's no coincidence that later in the series, AJ spirals into depression. He inherits the same void that opened up in his father that day, the realization that the world has no logic, no structure. Then there's the crew, the men who depend on Tony not just for money, but for meaning. For them, the shooting exposes a truth everyone's been avoiding: their leader is mortal. The myth of Tony Soprano, the man no one can touch, the man who always has the upper hand, gone. You see it in their behavior. They visit him in the hospital, but there's an awkwardness there. They don't know how to act around him. They look at him like they're looking at something unnatural, a god brought down to earth. When he recovers, they try to act normal, but the respect isn't the same. It's mixed with pity and fear. For Paulie especially, it's unsettling. He's always worshipped Tony as this untouchable figure, a man blessed by fate. Seeing him shot by his own uncle cracks that belief. Paulie's superstitious nature goes into overdrive. He starts talking about omens, bad luck, curses. It's like he can't process what happened without turning it into a cosmic punishment. For Christopher, the shooting is something else entirely. It feeds his confusion about loyalty and destiny. He's supposed to be Tony's heir, the man who inherits everything. But now, staring at his boss half dead, he sees what that inheritance really means, a life that ends violently, from a direction you don't expect. You can sense that from this point onward, Christopher starts pulling away emotionally, chasing Hollywood dreams, drugs, anything that distracts him from the reality that there's no glory left in this life. Silvio, ever the calm soldier, handles it the only way he knows how, by turning inward, doubling down on control. He becomes more serious, more calculating, almost cold. But even Silvio can't shake the image of Tony bleeding out. It stays with him. He understands the message that everyone else is trying to ignore. If this can happen, then everything can happen. The shooting fractures the hierarchy in subtle ways. The unspoken respect that once held the crew together starts to fray. Tony notices it too. When he returns, he expects to be welcomed like a returning general. Instead, he gets hesitation. People treat him gently. They walk on eggshells around him. No one jokes like before. And that, more than the pain or the recovery, is what truly gets to him. The realization that his authority has turned into fragility. The fallout of that shooting is bigger than blood or revenge. It's spiritual. It's the moment when The Sopranos shifts from being about crime to being about decay, not of a man, but of an entire idea. The idea that men like Tony and Junior can control their destiny, command respect, live forever through fear. The bullet ends that illusion. It shows that the world they built is fragile, temporary, meaningless. Junior's bullet wasn't just an act of confusion. It was prophecy. It revealed what Tony's world really was: fragile, temporary, already rotting. The fallout wasn't a phase he recovered from. It was the beginning of the end. The day Junior shot Tony, the family died. The rest of the series is just the sound of the corpse still walking,